Welcome to the GOL Podcast.
The new era of intelligence.
All right, welcome to the GOL Podcast. I am your host, Nick Smith, and joining me today is our Chief Growth Officer, Jim Moore. Jim, welcome to the GOL Podcast.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me down, and nice, easy drive.
Yeah, not too far from where you're at. So I really wanted to get started today with just talking about your background and letting people understand who you are and where you come from. We served together in the Army, so we have a lot of dirty stories about each other. But we'll forego those today and save those for another episode.
We'll see how the whole process goes. You know.
All right. So I was hoping you could tell us about your journey to joining GOL.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know how far back we actually want to go, but I listened to the first podcast, and I listened to your story about how you joined. I joined before 9/11, and it was really one of those times. And I don't know. I think most young people, when they're first getting out of high school, they're sort of lost, not really knowing what to do. And I was absolutely no different. Tried the college thing out for a little bit. Wasn't, I don't know. I think I ultimately always thought I would just get into construction. Swung by the recruiter station, and I knew I liked pictures, and that's sort of what I chose. I always find it interesting. You hear these people that like get into middle school, they're like, "Oh, what are you going to be? I'm going to be a dentist. I'm going to be a lawyer." That was never the case with me, right? I was like, I like girls, football. I like working, making money, right? Going out on the job site.
Right.
My dad was a contractor, so I actually enjoyed that.
Was the Army your first choice?
So I don't know. I don't know if I had a first choice. I know I had a last choice, and that was the Navy, mainly because I didn't like their knitted sweaters in the recruiting station. I'm like I don't quite understand it, right?
Sorry, Navy guys.
No, I know. Well, we're allowed to joke about them, right? Because we're all in the military.
Yeah.
I never quite understood, right? You're a recruiter, and you're trying to recruit 18, 19-year-old kids, and you're wearing a knitted sweater, right? And so I don't know. I never quite understood that. It was interesting. The Marine recruiter came out to the house. Well, he talked to me. He's like, "Well, I need to talk to your dad." I told him, like, "You don't want to talk to my dad." I'm like, "My dad, anybody that knows my dad, he's a very nice guy, but he's very hardcore. He's very strong-headed, and he did not want me going in the military. He had epilepsy when he was younger, so he wasn't able to join. So I think that's sort of jaded him a little bit. He's very happy I went in the military, and raves up and down about it now. But I remember the Marine recruiter. I'm like, all right, if you think you can handle it. And he came over, and oh my goodness, he was probably there for like 2 minutes before my dad chased him out of the house.
So you're from a small town in Colorado, right? Like, were you one of the first people to join the military, or did anybody else in your town join?
Oh, we have a whole bunch of people in my town.
A bunch of people?
Yeah. My graduating high school was 117 students.
Wow.
I'm from a town called Silt. It's a very big metropolis area.
Right.
No, we have a roundabout there now. It's sort of a big deal. But no, just deep in the mountains of Colorado, western Colorado, big cowboy country, cattle town. Rodeos. I wasn't into rodeos, but I like going to them. But no, we had a lot of people. Actually, probably the Marines out of our class. We had quite a few Marines that joined. Some of my good friends went into the Marines. We had a couple that went into the Army. But I actually waited about a year after. So I think that's very similar to what you ended up doing. So it's a similar story. I joined the Army. It was one of those things. It's like I knew that I knew I wanted to do something more than what I was doing, and it just sort of fell into me. I went to the recruiter station. I scored high enough. I was able to choose pretty much any job I wanted.
Around 2000-ish, somewhere in there?
It would have been January of 2001, so about a year after. And so I ended up leaving. I think the recruiter actually realized that I was sort of on the fence of whether I was going to go or not. So by the time I went to the recruiter station, they sent me out to the MEPS and shipped me out like 2 weeks later. So it all happened very, very quickly.
Okay, so you joined the Army. When you finally arrived to your basic training, all that stuff, what was the expectation in your head compared to the reality? Because I know for me, I had this warped view. I just thought the Army was 1,000 people somewhere doing stuff. I had no idea how big it was. I had no idea how many moving pieces were involved throughout the branches and stuff like that. Was that a shock for you at all?
Well, I definitely think it was a culture shock, right? So coming from a small town in Colorado. And I will also stay. I did spend some time up in like right on the Mason-Dixon line up in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and so that was a little bit different culture up there. But last several were back in Colorado. I was born in Colorado, moved to Pennsylvania, Maryland, spent about 9 years there, and moved back to Colorado. But I definitely think there's a culture shock because I've never really ever been in the city, other than driving through. I never hung out in the city. I was never, I never was around big groups of people. So when you end up coming into the military, it's like a clash of every different culture, and that was definitely new to me. I mean, you have people from I know Puerto Ricans. There's a lot of Puerto Ricans in the military, and a lot of different ethnic backgrounds, and so that part was definitely different, right? From being in the mountains of Colorado, as you can imagine.
Right. I grew up in Florida, so being around people from the Caribbean stuff was kind of normal for me, but I imagine in Colorado being a little bit different.
That's why you and I, we did not hit it off at all when you first showed up.
So,
I was like, I can't relate to this guy.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, I got to the unit at Fort Bragg around 2000, was it about 2003, right around there? And you guys were just getting ready to go to Kuwait. So you guys were deploying. I couldn't deploy yet because I didn't have my clearance. So what was that like, that
What?
2003-ish time frame, somewhere in there?
Yeah, so what month in 2003 did you get there?
I don't know. I want to say February, something like that.
That you got to Fort Bragg?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but
Okay.
It was somewhere around that time frame.
Yeah. So, so the interesting thing is in 2003, I don't know. Before I answer that, I'm going to say this. It always fascinates me. Like any organization you go to, like you can join the Army, you can join any big corporation, you can join a little company like GOL, and you can go in, you can find bad things about every organization, right? I think GOL is a great organization, or else I wouldn't have moved over 3 years ago. I mean, I love this organization. I love what you've developed, but at the same time, like there's always going to be bad things. So when I went into the Army, there's a lot of crazy and just sort of stupid things. Like I literally cut grass with scissors. I think that is completely asinine.
Right, you were the one.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of different things. Like I didn't really enjoy that. Right, I thought the Army wasted a lot of time and resources doing certain things. And so in 2003, I was actually
a big giant federal government bureaucracy wastes time
and resources.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Amazing.
know. I know, because you don't see it on the news or in politics at all. I mean, everybody's just extremely resourceful. That frustrated me, right? As again, Nick, my dad. He's very, he's a hard charger. I mean, if you go out on his jobs, I can't tell you how many times I got kicked off of his job site. Just not quite working hard enough.
Right.
But so that frustrated me. So actually, to answer your question, so in 2003, right before we were going to deploy, I was actually up in King of Prussia. I was at a course called the Dissemination Element course. Do you remember that? I think it was the DE for old imagery guys and gals. They'll understand that. All right, so I was up there at a course, and I actually got a call from the warrant officer because I had put in a packet to do corporal recruiting. So I was an E4 at the time. I put in for corporal recruiting, but that actually lets you go back to your hometown and do recruiting there because you're still young enough. You still have friends there. Now I don't have as many friends there because they've all picked up and moved out of Silk, Colorado. Can't imagine why. But I got a call from my warrant officer. He said, "All right, listen, you have two options." He goes, "You were approved for corporal recruiting." He goes, "So you can do that. That was approved. The commander has signed off on it. Or you can deploy with us to Iraq or Kuwait. We're going to actually go to Camp Commando with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force." And so that was really, I think there's certain times in your life that you don't really understand the gravity of the situation and like the gravity that decision will make and have on you for the whole rest of your life. So, and he didn't give me any time to think about it. It was like, that's when you had to make the decision. So I chose to take the deployment, and that really set forward why I'm here with you today.
Yeah, so this was...
That would have...
2003, so you have a tough decision. You end up going to Kuwait. This was right around the time we were entering Iraq, right? So what was that experience like?
Yeah, so definitely interesting and unique. You joined the military after 9/11. I joined prior, right? At that point in time when I joined, you talk to the recruiters like, well, we haven't been at war for a long time. Nothing's really going to happen. And then all of a sudden there's like that. It just got real. right? And so
It hit the fan.
yeah, and so I actually remember, when we deployed on that, and as we're leading up to it, right, there was drills all the time, and then the next that night before the initial invasion, there was, I'm a young, E4, I'm a specialist, and I'm in there, I'm doing my analysis, and I come across, and there's a big sandstorm, and our chief warrant officer, Jason Jones, who he had actually went off somewhere to go find some film somewhere, and big sandstorm. I don't know where hours later, he was stuck out in the desert somewhere, probably having a blast. And I came across what looked like 5 drive-through revetments with Scud B in tow, right? But my monitor had froze up, so I couldn't actually do any true analysis. I couldn't do any research, couldn't do anything.
Wait,
I got the dimensions.
You saw what now?
5 drive-through revetments. So a revetment would be like a berm, right? So you basically create these earthen berms and embankments,
right,
and then it sort of protects the equipment.
And you saw it from like national
imagery.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And so I had come across this, and it looks like 5 canvas-covered Scud B missiles in tow, right? And I was one of the big threats over in Iraq at that time is, where are these located? And so we were essentially going to be the eyes for the first MEF as they were driving into Iraq. All right, so it's from an intelligence perspective, if you're going to be going into somewhere, you want to know what you're going to be going into. And so this was the day before, and so we ran across this, but I couldn't do anything. Right, and next thing I realized I have all this, these Marine majors over my shoulder, and I'm sweating, in there, and sandstorms outside. Like, what is it? Make the call. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm like this young soldier. I'm like, this is new. I made the call. It was the wrong call. It wasn't a Scud B. It actually was a GHN 45, which is apparently a large piece of towed artillery. We still had to take it out. Right?
It sounds. Either way, it's a threat.
It was still a threat, right? So it still had to be taken out.
Not a Scud, but...
And, but between that and then the very next morning, any Marines out there listening or anybody that was at that base, we actually had a seersucker missile that actually hit right near our base. And, I remember I was laying, I wasn't quite on shift yet. I was just laying in my bunk. I'm laying, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to use the restroom. I need to get up. I need to get going. And then this thing hit. I'm telling you, it felt like the molecules in the air were just like, it felt like, Dumb and Dumber when he wants to impress the girl and he's like daydreaming and he's like fights that, I think it was a cook or something, right? The cook comes out and he's like, gets punched and he goes down and then he comes back up. He's like, whoa, I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah.
That's how I felt coming up out of my bunk. I was like, whoa. But it's a very real moment. I think that was probably one of the times in my life where it's like, yeah, we really could die, right? And you go back and you think about all the times when you're back in garrison and you're doing silly little things, or you're maybe not focused on the mission or training.
Cutting the grass with scissors.
And you're cutting the grass with scissors, right? Or picking up other people's cigarette butts because I don't smoke.
Right.
But it's like, I never want to be in that position where I know that we could have done more to prepare, right? I want to know that when I go in to do that job, or that, eventually when I picked up my E5 and I had soldiers under me, and, I want to know that we're making a difference. I want to know that I'm doing my part to make sure that they are good analysts and they have the tools necessary to do the mission right. Right. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
so like the missile hits. How far away is it from where you were staying? You were sleeping at night.
I don't really know.
Close enough.
Close enough that it knocked our servers offline.
Okay.
I think a couple people from our unit, I don't know, got a medal or award or something.
And it didn't detonate, obviously, because you're here. But given
it didn't detonate on me.
Right.
Clearly,
but had it completely detonated, it would have wiped out that entire.
It could have been very bad.
Camp.
Yeah, and I'm not a weapons expert by any means, which is also probably why I got into management, right? Because there's people much better at this job than me. But at that time, at that time there was a lot of secrecy behind it, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't know how many more of these type of missiles were coming in. We knew that we had the good Patriot missile batteries that were out there and they can do a lot of damage, but why did this one get through, right? So there was a lot of secrecy to it. But anyway, it was a bit of a scary moment. Did
they ever find out which exact unit fired it? Like, was it Iraqi Army?
Yeah,
obviously Iraqi Army,
okay.
but-
I'm dating myself here, but that's
Right.
a long time ago where I was a young
Right.
soldier. My job was to look at imagery. I think it was. I think it gets shot from the Gulf.
Wow.
So
Okay.
and that's I think it's like slow and low flying or something. That's why the Patriot missile battery didn't pick it up. I think they did end up getting something in that could like pick it up. I think it was we had to get some more Navy
Right.
technology in there or something. But
Wow.
I'm probably completely wrong with all of it. But we'll probably get emails like you sound like a complete
okay.
idiot. No.
That's all right. So you get back from Kuwait. What was that process like coming back from Kuwait and then realizing I think not too much further after that you had to deploy to Iraq because that's when my first deployment to Iraq with the unit. What was that transition like coming back from Kuwait? I had this experience when I got back from Iraq where I was kind of out of it for a few days. I was like, huh? Like yesterday we're driving around in Iraq in these, crappy Humvees everywhere with dust everywhere, dirt everywhere, people speaking other languages that I don't have a clue what they're saying for the most part. There was definitely a period of time when I came back where I was just out of it. I mean, I wouldn't call it PTSD or anything, but I was definitely like mentally not able to focus on anything for a couple of days. What was that experience like? Did you have the same experience coming back from Kuwait?
If you ask my sister, she's going to say yes. She drove me nuts. I definitely didn't have PTSD or anything like that. It's definitely it's a different environment when you're going from everything you do has meaning and matters and lives can be at stake. And, sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge. And this goes for, all my deployments is like you're doing something that really means, and then you get back and it's like everything just kept on moving back in the real world, right? If you will. And I think that's probably the most difficult is going from feeling like you're actually making a difference and you're actually having an impact and to coming back and being like, okay, well now it gets back to like me, right? Before it's always about, hey, let's do something good. And now it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? What's going to be that fulfillment? So I don't know. I definitely, again, it's definitely not PTSD with me. I will say that my sister Joy. Mm-hmm. She's a ridiculous person, absolutely.
I'm sure she won't watch this at all.
I don't know if she is or not. But I did go back to Colorado and visit family, and she did one of these things. It's like she's like, well, you have PTSD. I'm like, I don't have PTSD. She's like, no, I think you have PTSD. I'm like, I don't have PTSD. And by the end, it's she's like I don't have PTSD. She's like, oh my gosh, you're horrible. I'm like, I'm done.
I think there's a general assumption that veterans have PTSD, like period. It's not true. Not all veterans have PTSD. A lot of them do.
Yeah,
It's a very serious thing. But
I just wasn't there. I mean, and maybe you do act a little bit different when you come back, right? But that's just part of that normalization of how to getting back in, into society, having a normal conversation.
Yeah.
That you have to now you have to get back into a normal conversation where you have to be careful with what you say.
Yeah, you definitely have to be careful with what you say.
I think one of the most difficult things I had was coming back and finding somebody in my barracks room, and that wasn't cool.
Yeah, who was that?
I don't know. Somebody horrible named Nick.
I hope he wasn't that bad. All right, so you get back from Kuwait. How long was that window? I think you were back for like a year before we left for Iraq.
Let's see.
That.
So I got back. I believe
in that window, did you not get married?
I did.
Yeah.
So one thing I realized on the first deployment is that I don't want to die single. So I immediately came back and I went up to Pennsylvania. At the beginning, I told you that I lived in Maryland, Pennsylvania. Right. And so there was this hot, popular girl up in Pennsylvania that, I knew her and she knew me, but I knew her better than she knew me, right? Because I was just this tall, skinny, gangly guy, and she was like this pretty girl and, probably didn't really want to have a whole lot to do with me. But I went up there and we ran into each other. And I had an old friend, high school friend. He's like, hey, we're going to go out to the Inner Harbor and we're going to go out with Kelly Molyneux. And I'm like, I guess because I probably shouldn't say last names here, right? But we're going to go out with Kelly and this girl and that girl. And like, do you want to go? I'm like, no, I mean, you know me. I'm like, I'm just not a big clubber, you know. I'm
Right.
not quite that cool, right? I've never fit into that cool scene.
You can't wear a flannel T-shirt at most of the clubs. I mean, you can, but it's frowned upon.
You know what?
In most
At
clubs.
40 now, I can.
That's true. That's true.
Anyway, so we met her up in the Walmart parking lot. I'm like, well, I'll go up there and I'll just say hi, right? You know, and Kelly Molina, who is now my wife, like saw me and she like jumps out of the car, and I'm surprised she even remembered me. But she jumps out of the car and like ran over. She's like, Jimmy Moore, and she ran over and like jumped up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how we met. It was very romantic.
In the Walmart parking lot.
In the Walmart parking lot, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you know, they say love works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. So we're actually, what is the date today? The 18th. Yeah. So next week is going to be our 17-year anniversary. So
It's awesome.
it worked out well.
Congrats.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a long time to be together.
It is.
Somebody could handle you for that long. She must be special.
She is. She is. I'm special too.
Yeah. Well, we say you're special in other ways, Jim.
I know.
Different type of special. So okay, you get back, you get married, and then the Iraq deployment looms. What did you do in Iraq? I mean, I was I know we were deployed together, but I was in a different cell, or was I in the same cell? I don't even remember at this point. But what was that experience like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so let me back up just a little bit. So leading up, if you remember when I talked about the 2003 deployment, you know, there was that realization of like, man, this is real. Like when we're in garrison, we need to train like it's real, right?
Right.
And at our unit, we did have 24 mission operations going on, but it's always, I would say, like a lot of times it's like sort of a secondary review of
Right.
the intelligence.
It wasn't
Excuse
like
me.
super high speed super high ops tempo
Right.
stuff. It was more like, oh, we have some imagery. Can you guys take a look at this and get it back to us within a week?
Yeah, or
Right.
tracing like trails up in the mountains of Afghanistan. Very
Right.
exciting stuff.
Right. Well, it's riveting
Very,
stuff.
it is.
It's the stuff they don't show you in the movies.
I might have PTSD from doing that.
It's the stuff they don't show you in the movies. And sometimes intelligence is just straight up boring. But
But
nonetheless.
yeah. So you know, when I did come back, you know, one of the big things I want to do is like, you know, hey, let's make sure we maximize that time. So I do remember a time that I got back and I pinned E5 within like, I don't know, a month of being back. And, you know, so I remember I walked into what we'd call the war room or the mission operations room. And there's all of our E1s through E4s were all in there doing mission work. And I walked into our platoon office and all the E5s, E6s, E7s, they were all just sort of smoking and joking, feet kicked up on the table. And, you know, because, you know, clearly I had this like newfound rank.
Oh,
I'm
boy.
Like, I'm going to go.
Oh,
I'm going to go get him. I don't know if you know
New
me,
stripes.
but sometimes I speak probably when I shouldn't. But I walked into the platoon office and I said, you know, let's have an NCO meeting out in the trailer. And, you know, everybody in there like, oh, God.
The trailer is where things go down, by the way.
Yeah, the trailer that was in the back of the compound. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
where you have your it's going to get real.
Yep.
And you know, everyone's like, oh well, Sergeant Moore is calling a meeting. Everybody go out there, and it was like a big joke. And I said, you know, and we got in that trailer. And I said, you know, I think it's crap that we have E1s and E2s and E3s that know twice as much about how to do the technical job than our NCOs, right? And being an NCO, you're supposed to be both tactically and technically proficient. And at that time, you know, somebody said, well, everybody knows you're talking about me. Why don't you say my name? So I'm like, all right, Sergeant so-and-so, Sergeant so-and-so, Sergeant so-and-so. And my name was mud with a lot of them for the next year. But I'm saying all that to get to this next point. Is because when we ended up coming time to deploy the next time, that sort of put me in a position that I knew the systems and I knew how to operate it and set everything up. So I ended up getting put directly under a warrant officer, and that was sort of my chain of command. I went directly to, so I was a mission lead or mission manager, whatever you want to call it, for one of the shifts. And then David Little, who you remember.
Right.
I think he's a contractor now, right? He retired. That's how you know you're getting old, right? Because your old friends that you were, you know, young soldiers with are all retired. But he was the other shift. So between him and I, we ran the mission. I took one shift, he took the other shift, and we were good. We were a good pair. But you know,
It's really easy for some people in the military because it's so big and it's so bureaucratic to just float by like lumps of nothingness.
It's a big organization.
It's an unfortunate truth about the military, and I love the military. I love the people that serve, but there is just this like layer of people that just are there, and they're not really providing much value at the end of the day. In a lot of instances, and anyone that served can tell you this. Like anyone that served can tell you this. So what you're saying is 100% true. So you go in, you're passionate about actually learning to do this stuff the right way and having people that take the job serious. So because of that, they put you in charge of the imagery section, right?
Yeah. And so it was a great experience. And, really, I think one of the biggest challenges is, well, one, for me, that's the technical aspect, right? Because I'm not a technical person. But that's why I have friends like you, right, that are technical. But it's just a matter of, like, understanding your team's strengths and weaknesses, right? You hear me talk about whole brain management, right? So I'm a big advocate of whole brain management.
So
right?
this is an important pinnacle in time. This is where whole brain management stemmed from.
This is the start of it all.
Oh boy. What is whole brain management, Jimmy?
Whole brain management it's the concept that, if you don't want groupthink, right? If I wanted to hire somebody that thought just like me, I'm a big picture person, right? I'm not good with the details, right? So if I hired everybody that I got along with and they thought exactly like me, then we'd be dropping stuff all the time, right? So it's the idea that, hey, you want somebody that's going to be a big picture person, you want somebody that's a more detail-oriented person, you want somebody that's going to be more operationally focused, right? So it's just putting all those pieces together to create a machine and a mechanism that operates well, right? Don't want a car with an entire shell on top of a shell, right? You want a car with a shell and seats and an engine and a drive shaft and axles that work together, and together the entire unit moves forward. And so that's where really is what I started focusing on, and just trying to put together those teams that work right.
So before you're thinking this way before the Iraq deployment?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, I don't think they're like at that point in time you're really thinking about like, well, this is exact. It's a growing process, right? Mm-hmm. It's learning, it's maturing. Obviously, the more education. I've gotten some training on whole brain management since then. I'm like, oh, well, that's what I was trying to do. I didn't really know how to put the pieces together, right? That's where some education and training comes in. It's like, we all can have great ideas, but it helps if people help organize that, right? That've been doing it for a while. But
cool. So around 2004, I think it was October 2004. So this would have been about 16, 17 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's when we deployed to Iraq. So, I was in the Al-Fa Palace there at Camp Victory. You were in there with me. I think you were head of the section, and I was a worker bee, probably.
And look at us now.
Look at us now.
What would you like me to do after this meeting?
So we go through that deployment, and then we get back. You were supposed to get out, and didn't you get stop loss or something like that?
Well, I got stop loss right before that deployment.
Oh, right.
The stop loss hit at the beginning of
Lucky
October.
You.
With my terminal leave and everything. I would have been able to get out like end of October, but the stop loss hit like October 1st or something. So I actually, from a pay perspective, I actually lost money in the long run because President Bush, he signed in something like if you were stop loss, you'd get an extra whatever dollars. But I ended up extending a year to pick up my E6 because they wouldn't promote me without doing that. So that's what I did. So I did stay in until April 2006. So as soon as we got it back, you guys left me.
Yeah.
And then I was stuck doing all the return deployment stuff.
Yeah, I came out here to Wilmington.
Bunch of jerks.
To go to school. What did you do around that time frame? 2006. So I'm out here going to school. What were you doing?
Trying to figure out my next step in life.
Right.
But if you remember at the beginning, I said, a lot of people they choose what they're going to do. At that point in time, I still didn't know what I was going to do.
You didn't want to know what you want to do when you grew up?
No. And I'm still changing every day, right? No, so I had even researched even just getting out of the military, defense, intelligence defense. I think a lot of times we all get sort of stuck. We're like, well, hey, we know there's a great career, there can be great jobs in here, but it's scary to push yourself out, right? There's several scary times in life, right? Going from high school and like figuring out what you're going to do in life, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I have to make a decision right now and I have to do this. And the same thing happens as you start transitioning from the military out to get out. And there's like, oh, well, what am I going to do now? And there's, this is it. I'm going to make this decision. It's going to set forward the next 30 years. And I don't really think that is, but there's definitely, I think most people are a little bit risk adverse, right? So that's a scary moment. So at that point in time, I was just trying to figure out, was I going to stay in the defense industry? Was I going to get out? I ended up getting a call from one of my old soldiers, who a good friend, John Mattis. And he said, "Hey, I got this job over at this organization, and you're going to be great. You're going to be great for the position. I guarantee you're going to get it. Just shoot me your resume." I'm like, "Okay. Well, I just bought a house and I didn't have a job, so it's I sort of needed a job here soon. So that's what I did, and that's again, I don't want to say that I actually chose life. It sort of chose me, which is probably why I'm not a doctor or a lawyer right now.
You turned out all right. So you take a job with a big defense contractor. So this is kind of like a different phase in your life, right? You kind of you're married now. Did any of your children born at this point? No, not yet. Not yet. Children. Yeah. Not yet. So, what was that like transitioning out of the military into what we call in the military? We call it, a big boy job, right? Because we joke with each other.
Well, you're grown up now.
You're grown up.
Getting a real paycheck and having to pay your own bills and.
Yeah, what was that like?
Well, it was exciting, right? I think just about every male getting out of the military immediately grows his hair longer. And I did the same thing until I realized I looked like an idiot because I got a skinny face. Less skinny now, but so I have a couple of those awkward pictures floating around there.
So hold on. There's a picture of you with long hair somewhere?
Longer hair, longer than it should have been. I'm a child of the 90s and early 2000s, right? So I had to grow the longer sideburns.
We need to find these pictures have to exist. We have to find them.
Yeah, they're out there. They're probably not going to find them.
Are they on MySpace or something?
Well, no. This was like pre everything being out there in the open, right? We didn't have these smartphones, thank God.
Right. Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, no, I do think it was a little bit. It was interesting. When I got to Fort Bragg 20 years ago, I got down there and I'm like, man, this place sucks. Fayetteville. I'm like, man, this is horrible. It's like 10-to-1 male to female ratio, and I'm a single soldier down there, right? And here it is 20 years later. I'm like, North Carolina's not that bad. It definitely has improved a lot. But a lot of you guys left me. It was a very sad moment. It's like I had all these Army friends and now I have none, right? But no, so you went down to Wilmington. I know Brian went down to Wilmington. A bunch of go listen. A lot of you guys went out to Wilmington, having a lot of fun getting your education. A lot of our friends went up to NGA, Northern Virginia, Springfield, Tampa, where they could. I know some, and I stuck down at Fort Bragg. But it was good because there was a lot happening down at Fort Bragg, and I was able to get into the special operations community. I think that anytime you can get in the special operations community, you feel the impact that you're making quicker, right? Even in the conventional military, that you're making an impact somewhere, but you may not see that impact happen as rapidly. But when you're supporting special operations, it's definitely a different feel. It puts a different level of meaning and importance to your job, right? So there's that level of satisfaction. So I also think for my personality, I can be a very passionate person. I've been described by old bosses as a passionate person. And I think that benefited me in my career because when you stick around the military and there's a certain type of type A personality that jives well. Kelly used to always say, she's like, oh, when you get out of the Army, you're not going to do that great because, you can't have that same personality. Turns out you still have that personality. I know, and when I deal with real estate agents, it does not work out well.
I don't imagine that being the case. So you go and work for a big defense contractor. How long are you there for?
Ultimately 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah. So I got in there, was first doing some GIS integration.
How do you spell GIS?
It's before or after H or something like that. Yeah. Geospatial Information Systems. So I was doing some in integration.
Geographic information systems?
Or geographic.
Let's debate. Let's not debate.
Yeah, debate means something that I care about more about. Yeah, but I think the thing I liked about the Army is just being able to take care of people, and I don't know if take care of it is right, but just help guide and direct where I can. I certainly don't have the right answers and don't have all the information and answers on everything, but I can, maybe provide some advice and guidance. And remember John, the guy that got me the job, ultimately, he was the one that, he came back to me later and he's like, hey, you know what, you really taught me a lot about, and he brought up a specific instance, and I know what that instance was. I'm certainly not going to say it on here.
Right.
But I thought, that was good. That made me feel good. But anyway, so I wanted to eventually get back into sort of management or leading. And it's not management as in hey, I want to manage people. It was, I want to just be in a position where I feel like I'm having more of an impact on other people's lives. And whenever I'm doing GIS integration, oh my gosh, man, just doing geoprocessing. I mean, you can set off 7 servers to do processing imagery, and then errors out, and you got to go restart it. And back in 2006, we're way further back than where the technology is today, and that was very frustrating. I don't have quite the brain that you have, so it was extra frustrating. So that's ultimately why I wanted to get into more of that management leadership, and I like the strategy behind it too. I just like, again, the whole brain management, putting the different pieces together. So I ended up going back to my boss, and I told him, I said, hey, what do I need to do to get your job? And he looks at me, he's like, well, this is a good start, having this conversation. That's why I would encourage anybody that wants to do that, have the conversation with them. I would love for nothing more than to have somebody come up to me and be like, dude, I want your job. And be like, okay, well, come take it, right? Be better than me. It shouldn't be difficult, right? There's a lot of people in this industry that are tons better at this stuff than I am. And I would love to be able to step this side and find another gap that I can fill somewhere else.
Right. So I definitely want to talk about working in the defense industry. Your experience working at this big, huge company and then moving over to an awesome, innovative small business like GeoAL and all the cool things that we're doing. I definitely want to hit that on the next episode. So that's going to wrap us up for this time, and we'll see you guys next time on the GeoAL podcast.
Visit geoal.com and learn how GeoAL implements next-generation intelligence advancement technologies to aid the Department of Defense with precision and expertise analysis. GeoAL.
The new era of intelligence.